Thank you for joining us. The Columbian Editorial Board is pleased to welcome candidates for state representative from the 18th District. I am Greg Jane, the editorial page editor, and I'll let the other editorial board members introduce themselves. Colleen.
Hi, I'm Colleen Keller. I'm the assistant news editor of the Columbian and a member of the editorial board.
And I'm Craig Brown. I'm the editor of the Columbian and a member of the editorial board.
And as I mentioned before, we are recording this. We will post it unedited on both our website and our YouTube channel for the benefit of the community. And let's see, I think that is all of the housekeeping. So now we'll get to the candidates. Please take 1 to 2 minutes to introduce yourselves and explain why you are running for this position. And we'll start with Greg.
Great. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate the Columbian board taking some time to interview us. So I'm running for Legislative District 18, Position 2, to bring common sense and solutions to Southwest Washington. I grew up in the Mount Vista area. I've been living for the last 10 years or so in the Battleground area. Currently, I serve on the Battleground Planning Commission, and until very recently, I was a board member of NAMI Southwest Washington. And so I'm also a business lawyer and a small business owner as well. So that life experience really prompted me to run, to try to build a business-friendly climate in this state and improve some workforce issues that are challenging to small business owners right now, to bring additional resources and policy changes to the state in regards to how we deal with homelessness, mental illness, and drug addiction issues. And then finally, just to talk about quality of life issues. So a longtime Clark County resident, look forward to earning the vote.
Great, thank you. And real quick, Greg, what kind of business do you own?
Sure, I own a law firm. I have several employees in that capacity. I also work for another law firm. I have all the same small business challenges, whether it's staffing or payroll taxes, that any other small business does.
Okay, thank you. And Duncan, welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Duncan Camacho. I am a neurotrauma ICU nurse. I work at Peace Health Southwest Medical Center here in Vancouver, Washington, and I'm running to be the next state representative here in the Legislative District, 18th Legislative District. I want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to the editorial board here, and I really appreciate that. I'm a proud member of the Washington State Nurses Association. I also represent workers as a delegate on the Southwest Washington Central Labor Council. I'm running for state representative because I want to work to increase access to healthcare, which includes protecting a woman's reproductive rights. Unfortunately, it's been shown that those rights are under attack across this country. I want to work to bring down prescription drug prices. I want to help recruit and retain officers to help keep our community safe. I want to ensure that children in our state have equitable access to schools. I want to help offset the growth of homelessness with improvements in access to mental health care, help improve affordable housing, help to lower property taxes, and really to help bring family wage jobs to Clark County. For a little bit of background about me, I'm married to my wife, Dana, for over 10 years. We have 2 beautiful girls, Olivia and Emily, ages 8 and 6. I'm a first-generation American. I was born in Oakland, California at Oakland Naval Hospital. My father, who is a Vietnam veteran, was stationed in the Bay Area. I spent 10 years as a paramedic in San Jose. I started out really in EMS as an EMT out in East LA, several years before that, but moved to Texas for nursing school, where I received my bachelor's degree in nursing from Texas Tech University. Eventually, my wife and I, we found our way to the Pacific Northwest and here to Vancouver, Washington, and we really couldn't be happier.
Great, thank you, and thanks to both of you again for joining us. One of the big issues facing the state is the state revenue forecast continues to go up. There's a lot of money available for the legislature. What should lawmakers do with that? And we'll start with Duncan.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the budget surplus is a big topic of conversation. And obviously there's, the short term, we've heard before, the short term surplus, We are in, I think we do need to acknowledge that we are, potentially, have another recession-like issues here. So I think we'd be cautious about how much what we want to do with that surplus. I think we also need to be cognizant that we are still coming out of a global pandemic. And I think some of that surplus did come at a cost for departments and organizations and maybe other state budgets who were cut during that pandemic. Obviously, we need to have a stable economy. I think it's pretty widely known that we did better than other states during the pandemic. We were kind of better suited to rebound because of our rainy day fund. I think it's important. I think it's just, it's budget planning that, there are peaks and valleys when it comes to what we have to deal with our economy, and obviously having a rainy day fund helps us kind of navigate those valleys without having to put more stress on the voters and taxpayers.
Great, thanks. Greg, what should we do with the surplus?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things we need to do with the surplus. Number one, we need to lower taxes and cut costs where we can, and particularly in light of a coming recession. Currently, our gas prices are going back up. We need to look at least at a temporary gas tax cut. Gas taxes are slated to go up another 43 cents next year. We need to make sure that we're not pricing working class families out of the ability to get to and from their jobs. And I think that's one of the things the legislature could do. Number two, I think that putting some of that money aside for a rainy day fund is a great idea. But I think the third thing we can do and should allocate money to additional resources to the drug and mental health problems and homelessness challenges. That is a critical issue because it affects property tax rates, it affects crime rates, it affects the livability of our communities. So I think we have to address getting additional mental health training for our law enforcement, getting additional mental health resources for early intervention, early counseling services, as well as drug treatment programs and additional beds, because that, in my view, having worked with these populations now for several years, is the only real way we can break this cycle between homelessness and jail, is to get those additional resources. I think that's one thing that the state should absolutely spend that. I think, again, though, we have to look at tax cuts where we can to make sure that in this age of inflation, families can afford the basic commodities that they rely on as part of their family household.
Now, a lot of critics would say that we have put a lot of money into mental health care or battling homelessness, and adding more money isn't effective. How would you answer that? Yeah,
I really disagree with that because as I mentioned, I've been a NAMI board member in Southwest Washington for many years now, and I resigned before running for this office a couple of months ago. The money that we need to allocate. First of all, we can allocate money to additional training for our law enforcement and our first responders who are often on the scene. It takes a special training to be able to do crisis intervention. And that is something we can invest in right now. We don't need to wait for that. But number two, the key issue right now in stopping or inhibiting our ability to work with these populations, particularly the mentally ill, is our lack of a workforce, lack of licensed clinical social workers, a lack of licensed mental health professionals. What that means is we need to take state dollars and invest in education and training. That may mean additional scholarships, incentive programs at our graduate schools, at our undergraduate institutions, to incentivize those career paths so that we have adequate personnel to be able to deal with our mental illness crisis that we have right now in the state. I also think there aren't enough beds. I don't know of anybody working in the judicial system who thinks there are enough beds. But these are long-term solutions. We don't have an instantaneous fix to this problem, but I think we can make additional investments where, it may take 5 to 10 years to get new career paths into the workforce, but I think it's something we need to get started on sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Craig?
Sure. So maybe that leads into our next question about what the state's role should be in assisting law enforcement. A lot of people have crime and petty theft and everything else on their minds right now. Just wondering what the state's role should be. Duncan, do you have some ideas on that?
I mean, yeah, obviously, you know, as a paramedic for many years, I worked side by side with law enforcement for a long time in various capacities. And, you know, I may not be a law enforcement officer, but I'm, you know, I think I can honestly say that, you know, I understand the job and know how difficult it is. And, you know, understand that really for, you know, recruitment and retention for officers is huge right now. When it comes to the state, you know, involvement, I think we're, you know, you'll hear a lot of people say that it's the state's, you know, the reason why law enforcement can't engage in pursuits, and you know, some of that has to do with, I think, a staffing problem. I mean, obviously, you know, for, you know, I'm not going to get into the intricacies of, you know, engaging in pursuits, but you know, it's not just one officer that does it, and so you have a staffing problem, you have a pursuit problem, and so these things can, you know, they are, you know, they are connected, and I think obviously working with, you know, that kind of comes into like local government, you know, partnerships is where, you know, the county has opportunities to have a 1% tax to help law enforcement, you know, budget and salary. I know we are, you know, our officers here in Clark County, their salary is not competitive. It's really hard to recruit officers when you already at a disadvantage from other agencies around the area.
Okay, thank you. Greg, I want you to answer the question too, but I just wanted to clarify, your clients are business clients. You don't, you're not a criminal defense attorney.
Defense. No, I do indigent court-appointed indigent defense. So we do that work. I deal with this population every day.
Oh, okay. That I did not know.
Both sets of clients.
Oh, okay. So well, what's your perspective then?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of key things the state can do in terms of the criminal justice system. Number one is we need to have additional training programs. There aren't enough seats. That's one of the major issues with getting new police officers certified, is there aren't enough seats at the police academy. We need to look at how to get maybe regionalized police academies or additional bunks, so to speak, up the police academy, so that law enforcement officers who want to work here can get through certification much sooner. Right now, they have waiting for 9 to 12 months just to get into the police academy after they've been made a job offer. So by shortening that timeline, we can have a positive impact. I think Duncan said something though that is just fundamentally wrong. The Washington State Legislature passed a bill that disallowed police pursuits in the last legislative session. That is something that has to be changed by the state legislature. They also changed the law with respect to reasonable suspicion, the ability for law enforcement officers to do pat-down searches. That's lawful in almost every other state, not in Washington. Right now, if you are a minor in possession of alcohol, that is a criminal charge, a minor in possession. Okay, but if you're a minor with fentanyl, if you are a minor with methamphetamine, if you are a minor with heroin, that is legal under the current laws that were passed in the last legislative session. That is the wrong way to go. It absolutely sends the wrong signal to decriminalize those hard drugs, and we need to get that fixed at the state level.
Now, wasn't that a result of a Supreme Court ruling?
The Supreme Court ruling simply said that there needs to be a mens rea. That is, what is the state of mind in the Blake decision. But the state legislature went far further than that. They could have simply amended the law and said, in order to be found guilty of possession of a controlled substance, you have to have knowledge that it is a controlled substance. But they went far further than that and deregulated them completely. So now the status is you have to have 2 warnings, and an officer has to note in the file that the person has been giving 2 warnings, and then they can be charged maybe with a misdemeanor possession charge. But the ability for an officer to actually do that is completely unrealistic because if it's not the same officer, it's not necessarily the same warnings. But it sends the wrong, regardless of the intricacies of the bill, it sends the wrong signal. The reason why you need drugs to be criminalized, at least at the misdemeanor level, is to bring folks dealing with those challenges into the court system. In Washington State, we have tremendously good drug court programs with wraparound services. That is, drug addiction counselors, homeless counselors, housing coordinators, judges and prosecutors and counselors and defense attorneys who are all trying to get these people clean and sober. And we have really good programs, but if you can't arrest them, you have no way to bring them into those programs. So it sends the wrong signal, again, to have these decriminalize these various hard drugs.
Craig, did you have a follow?
No, Duncan, did you have a rebuttal on that, or?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously there's, this issue of law enforcement, we just talked about homelessness. I mean, these are very closely related issues. I mean, we just talked about, a homeless problem, and really, I can easily say as a paramedic background, as an ICU nurse, I mean, the triad of homelessness, of trauma, addiction, and/or mental health. And each of those things can precede the other, and they perpetuate the other. And it's a vicious cycle. And I think that's where the acknowledgement of where we're trying to, you're trying to, deal with addiction without criminalizing them and then putting them in the same cycle over and over again. I mean, yes, are there laws that can be adjusted? Absolutely. But I mean, to have the same approach year after year, we're trying to come up with something different, and we're trying to help people break that cycle of addiction without criminalizing them and putting them in the same cycle of addiction, and then continues mental health, which continues trauma. And then these things are predictable, and they're visible, and it's something that we have to address. And obviously with any law you can make adjustments, but I think we also need to understand that some of these addiction problems, most people that are don't want to be in that position, but they're stuck in that position.
Okay. And you mentioned with any law you can make adjustments. Would you agree with Greg that there need to be adjustments regarding the decriminalization of hard drugs?
I think, like anything else, there's two parts to that. There's simple possession, where that's the kind of where you're those are the people you want to help with getting clean or dealing with addiction. Anybody that's obviously in large quantities, sales, of course, those are the individuals you want to address with and you want off the street. And both of those addressing both of those also deals with the problem. If there's if you're addressing people who have large quantities in sales, it's easier for people to be to acquire drugs in some capacity. I know there's always an issue with that, but what I'm trying to get at is at least you're addressing it on multiple areas. It's not just one single issue that you're trying to address.
Craig, anything else?
Sure, I'm going to change the subject completely if we can. The 18th district is growing very rapidly. So Ridgefield up by 179th, it's just going gangbusters. What can the state do to help make sure that some of that housing is affordable? Greg, you want to try that question?
Sure. So we've been really struggling that in the city of Battleground, where I've been a planning commissioner for the last 8 or so years with that exact issue. As you know, Battleground is exploding. My parents live just off of 179th in Mount Vista, in the same house that I grew up in. When we first moved there, I think there was a single flashing red light that was hanging by the Burgerville, what's now the Legacy Salmon Creek complex. So that area has changed a lot since I was a kid. I think where we have to look at affordable housing is looking at bringing in additional lands into inventory, but doing so in an environmentally responsible manner. I'll give you an example of that. Battleground is something like 50% wetlands. It's a very high percentage of wetlands, so we obviously need to be sensitive to that. but we can't simply say, well, we're never going to build a wetland again because there are these wetlands issues. So I think there's ways to do it environmentally sensitive, but we have to, the best way to reduce the cost of housing is to bring down or to open up additional inventory. The second issue that we can work on, I think, is not passing these rules or laws that drive up the cost of housing with minimal effect for the environment. Obviously, everybody wants clean air, clean environment, but when the rule came in to switch over or turn off natural gas, well, that's going to raise the cost of other forms. It's one of the cheapest costs of energy in a house. Now you're going to have to use less efficient electrical heating systems and other housing pumps and things like that. So again, you're getting a very marginal savings in terms of carbon emissions at best by shifting away from natural gas in a residential house, for a whole lot of cost on the other side. And so again, as we look at these things, we have to look at them holistically. For every action, there is some reaction, right? And so we have to look at it from a perspective of a whole system approach. And the best way, in my view, to bring down the cost of housing is to let more land in that is available. Part of the problem we have is economically unviable farmlands. So if you drive north along 50th and 72nd, there's a huge amount of Ag 20 designation in there. Well, the problem with Ag 20 designation is no one actually wants to farm it because it's too expensive to farm. So that's something we got to look at, is when we talk about having these ratios of what ag lands make sense. Yes, but that may be theoretically possible, that ratio, but does it make sense from a farmer who wants to invest a business in that location?
Thank you. Duncan, what are your views on how the state can help make housing more affordable?
Yeah, this is obviously a topic that I've been knocking on doors since the beginning of the year, and this is definitely a topic of concern for voters. Obviously, there are many stakeholders involved when it comes to affordable housing. You got builders, realtors, contractors, council, city, local, and county councils. Then the state involved with rules and regulations. So obviously, there's a lot of stakeholders involved, and that makes the issue more complex, and how we need to address, and who which stakeholder. You don't want to have just a single person that benefits the most. But I think we also need to rethink how we view housing. I mean, it's whether it's multi-dwelling units, we have a lot more apartments that we building in town, and we've gone up more than out. I mean, obviously we have a steady loss of agricultural land. I mean, but also, whether it's how it's zoned and designated. I mean, local food is an issue people are concerned about as well. I think also, my big, concern would be is, whether at a state level, you're addressing it's hard to address permit issues when those are county kind of driven. But if there's any way to incentivize where you can have maybe a cheaper permit or some other kind of incentive for builders to help put percentage of what they're building as affordable housing, that will also be beneficial. I also think that just it's also hard when you're navigating the market. I mean, the market will tell you what you can have a piece of dirt anywhere in this county, and it's worth more now than it was 10 years ago. I mean, you're navigating a lot of complex issues, and there's not one single answer that's going to fix it. But I do think that we do have to address the problem, and I think we need to, whether it's incentivizing builders, addressing land use, obviously are necessary steps. But it is, like I said, it's such a major issue for people that we do need to act at the state level.
Thank you.
Colleen?
Yeah, let's talk about public schools for a minute. I would appreciate knowing both your thoughts on how our our public schools doing? And let's focus a little bit on, we know in Clark County, special ed is becoming quite a topic. A lot of parents saying that their children's needs are simply not being met. And a story we ran this week seems to indicate part of the problem is there is a conflict between these individual education plans for this one particular child and then what the state requires. What would you think needs to be done from the legislative side where our public schools are concerned? And Duncan, let's start with you, please.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, education is a big part of the state budget, and we should strive for equitable access. I mean, I think that's important. I think we're fortunate here in Clark County to have great public schools that give kids the magnet option to specialize in the arts at VSAA or STEM at ITech. But not all schools have these options. And then when you reference like special education, it's obviously one of the areas that the clear decision kind of lacked. And obviously special education, there's when it comes to like school planning and budgeting, one individual child may need more support than the other, and it's really hard to anticipate those until the kids are already in the school and they've already started they started the school year. And that's hard when you're trying to plan your budgets for those kind of things. Obviously it's important. I think it'd be hard pressed people to find people that are going to say we shouldn't do more for our special education students in the state. But what I think we can do is, address that probably more like a student helper or budget shortfall that it creates. But I think another area here that's with our education is, our career and technical education, our CTE. That provides an important pathway to success for students that are outside of, STEM or the other programs I just discussed. These offer students great opportunities to personalize their education based on their career interests or their unique learning needs. One of the areas that, it's not in our district, but something that I think is important is the Longview School District has a partnership with like the Longview Kelso Building Trades Council, and through collaboration from local unions such as iron workers, laborers, electrical workers, they get the training they need in high school to start an apprenticeship program once they graduate. That's a transition from high school to a good paying job with a trade and great opportunities for kids. So I think there's different areas we can address when it comes to education. I think it's like I said, important for a standpoint that we invest heavily in our youth in this state, because it will pay off down the road. It's just it's hard to see that payoff right away, but I think it's important.
Okay, Greg, how about you?
Yeah, thanks. So, my son was tested for an IEP, and so I've been through that process before, and it's tough when you're going through it, and so I have a lot of sympathy for folks who are dealing with that. I think we have a structural workforce issue, kind of like the same mental health social workers that I was talking about a minute ago within the police and criminal justice system, and we have the same problem here, which is we need additional highly trained, highly skilled educators and folks that can come in and really deal with this very vulnerable population. And that, again, there's no short-term fix to that. It's going to be a long-term. We have to be focused on getting people into these career paths so that we have the resources we need in the schools. I don't think it's necessarily an issue of just funding it at the school level. I think it's funding it at our graduate programs in particular and at our undergraduate programs so that we can get the right people trained in how to deal with these into the classrooms as teachers and as specialists in their field. I fully agree. We need. I'm very proud, and I've been talking about this for a couple of months now about how to get for high school students. We have to let high school students know that college is not the only route. For many of our high school students, we need to make sure that they know that there is a great place that they can go directly from high school into highly skilled workforce, whether that's carpentry, whether that's ironworking, whether it's construction, that there is an alternative to college. And I think that's one of the things that perhaps my generation and some of the school counselors in my generation in the 90s missed, was just telling everybody they need to go to college. So I'm very proud to have any number of business groups and trade groups, general contractor groups who have endorsed my candidacy because we need these skills to be in the classroom, so you can get credits for doing skills-based learning, so that you can go out and get a high-paying job as soon as you graduate. So I certainly agree with that. I would push those policies in the state legislature to make sure that kids know that there's an alternative, highly successful career path other than simply going to college.
Okay, thank you.
Colleen, anything else?
Yeah, let's shift gears again. Duncan had mentioned in your opening statement about reproductive rights. Right now, Washington is one of the states where it does seem to be that access to abortion is something that is pretty well protected. But let's speak theoretically. What if a bill should gain foothold in the legislature that would try to put restrictions on that? How would you deal with that as a legislator? And Greg, let's start with you.
Sure. So first of all, I think we need to acknowledge that the status quo in Washington is not likely to change. Certainly not that I can see it. I think that the voters, through the voter initiative process, were declared very forcefully how they felt about the abortion issues. I am pro-life, but I do believe there should be exceptions, safe, legal, and limited exceptions, and I think that makes sense. I have personal beliefs on that, but I believe that any change to the status quo must come from a voter initiative, not from the legislature. I think that would be wrong. As a male, it makes me fairly apprehensive to try to determine these issues for women. So I think that any change to the status quo would need to be done by voter initiative, not by the legislature.
Okay, Duncan, how about you?
So I'm very clear where I stand. It is I'm endorsed by Pro-Choice Washington, Planned Parenthood, National Organization of Women. My father passed when I was young. I was the youngest, only male in my house, and I grew up in a house full of women. Sisters, mom, and then aunts and grandmothers who came to stay with us. And I mean, it's come full circle now. I'm the only male in my house with my wife and daughters, but I'm very clear where I stand on reproductive rights. It is obviously a very it's a topic of discussion that I'm still talking to voters about and knock on their doors. I've talked to down ticket Republicans, military Republicans who are appalled at where we're at in these discussions of reproductive rights. I mean, I was just watching Fox News on Sunday. Fox News poll, 63% do not approve of the Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. So this is a very significant issue to voters in this county and in this state. And where I would feel that, there's, candidates can say where they stand, but there are candidates who are endorsed by, who take money from organizations that fully believe that there are no exceptions to abortion. These are organizations that believe if you're, instance of incest, no exceptions. Rape, blame the victim. And unfortunately, we've seen around this country where there's so many. We've given rapists more rights than women, and so I am very clear where I stand. It is very prominent on the minds of voters, and I think where people try to, I think it's very important where people understand, regardless of what maybe a candidate says. Who they are endorsed by and who they are trying to support are also a big deal.
Now, are you saying that Greg is supported by those groups?
I believe that every Republican in Clark County is supported by these groups.
Greg, what would you say?
I have no idea what he's talking about. I'm not that I know of by any of them, so I don't know what he's talking about. I don't know what I genuinely don't. I think that might be a good talking point. I don't think it's accurate. I don't know. I legitimately have no idea what that's talking about.
Okay. Colleen, anything else?
No, thank you.
Craig, do you want to ask the standard question about the bridge?
Well, yes, I would love to ask the standard question about the bridge. It's a 20-year Columbian tradition to ask candidates about the bridge. So what are your views of the Interstate Bridge Replacement Project? Is it on the right track? So Greg, you want to start?
Sure. So I think when we talk about an interstate bridge, we have to first acknowledge it as an absolutely crucial lifeline, a regional and economic lifeline for Clark County. So I think that where we get a little bit off track, I think we do need additional lanes, potentially a fourth lane across the I-5 bridge. I think that is a realistic assessment of just how many commuters are using our bridge in their vehicles. I think if we want to talk about light rail, I know Portland certainly wants to talk about that. My view, and I've lived in cities before where I've commuted on light rail every day. I don't have an issue with it, but I do have a cost efficient issue with it, which is we don't have the population density to support it right now in Vancouver. If you want to talk about engineering the bridge to make it future proof, so be it. But right now, to put a light rail into downtown Vancouver, my wife works in Portland. So for her, it's not realistic to assume that she's going to get in her car, drive to downtown Vancouver, get onto light rail, ride light rail into the Rose Quarter, and then switch to a bus to go the rest of her route. Or she can just hop in her car and get there in half the time by just driving across the bridge. So I think that future-proofing it potentially makes sense. But the other thing that I get really concerned about on a bridge is when we talk about this tolls issue. I am adamantly against tolls. So I worked in high school and in college for a few years as a cashier over in Jansen Beach. And if you are someone who is making at near minimum wage or at minimum wage working over there in Portland, we cannot expect at a time of high gas prices to take an additional percentage out of the family budget just to cross the I-5 bridge and pay a toll when, oh, by the way, you're already paying Oregon state income taxes just for the luxury of working on that side of the river. So I am against tolls on the I-5 bridge. I think it hurts folks who are working on that side of the bridge. It's unfair because they're already paying taxes. And that's part of the reason why we need a business climate on this side of the river that can attract and encourage job growth so that less of our folks have to worry about commuting over to that side of the river.
Quick follow-up before we get Duncan to answer is then how would you pay for the local match of the project? Would you have a general tax on something? Say, would you increase the sales tax, for example?
No, I don't think it should be done by a local match. I think this is a regional. In other words, this is a regional issue that is a lifeblood from from the Bellington down to San Diego. In other words, there is truck traffic going between Vancouver, BC, and even into Mexico. They're using this. So I don't think it's fair to put that on the backs of the Clark County taxpayer when it improves and promotes the entire economy of the region. It should be done by the Washington legislature, not by local taxing authorities.
So you'd like to see the legislature?
I think because I think that cost needs to be borne by the area at large who is using the bridge for commerce.
Okay. Duncan, what's your thoughts on the IBR project?
Well, obviously the I-5 bridge replacement is vitally important to our, economic competitiveness, our business vitality. I-5 represents the most important link, one of the most important links in the West Coast transportation corridor. Obviously, it was voted by the state legislature to be a statewide significance, considering, like I just said, its main artery between Mexico and Canada. It should be considered also a national one. I've lived in kind of two polarizing political areas. I lived in Northern California and I lived in Texas. Both areas had tolls. They're not exclusive to, it's not a partisan issue. I think also there can be discussions on tiered tolling, income-based tolling. There are definitely avenues for that, and even in Texas, you could have cheaper rates on your badge for income-related issues. So I know that other people than just our Southwest Washington and Portland use that bridge, but somebody has to pay for it. And obviously, tolling is I think a culture shock. Unfortunately, I think if you've never grown up with them, obviously in Seattle you have congestion tolling, but it's not normal around here. But there's so many areas around this country that tolling is a part of the transportation network and the cost structure of maintenance, that it has to, and something has to pay for it. So whether or not you're going to ask the state to pay for a bridge that not everybody uses, or you're asking the people who use the bridge to pay for those costs, I mean, those are definitely topics of conversation. But I think that I don't want tolling, like, I've heard, potentially tolling both ways. I don't think that's appropriate. But I do think, that their tolling will change on how people, if you're people who are maybe traveling to Portland to go to Home Depot in the morning, and that's part of that congestion. They're trying to de-incentivize people just going across the river to shop during traffic time. And so I think that's what some of that, a rationale is behind. And then obviously there's, a lot of people want to talk about a third bridge, and obviously that is a discussion down the road. But even when, you have discussions about a third bridge, and, that bridge has to connect to Oregon, which we need the state legislature to be involved in. So there are also, obviously, these are, opens up these cascade of issues. But I think there's, I've talked to labor, business, transportation, legislatures, city council. I mean, most people want this bridge replaced. So it's not I wouldn't say it's a partisan issue. I just think that it's, so many people need it and want it. And I think we need to work with our Oregon legislature to make sure that it is equitable for Washington as well.
Thank you. So quick question before Greg gives me the hook here.
Wait, I'm sorry, I want to go back just for a second. Greg, for the tolling issue, if a project moved forward with proposed tolls, would that be enough? Would you oppose the entire project? Or
well, I think
maybe be
I mean, again, I am philosophically against tolls because I think it hurts lower income workers who have to commute that bridge. So where it goes from there, I'm a lawyer. I want to look at the details. So I am.
So it wouldn't necessarily be a deal breaker.
But I would look at it as a holistic package. But I think we need to do what we can to, especially to our partners in Oregon, to say, listen, you are already taxing us with Oregon state income tax. That's part of why we're paying Oregon state income tax.
So would it or would not? So it wouldn't necessarily be a deal breaker.
Well, I'd have to look at it in the whole. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Craig, go ahead.
Sure. So who's a local legislator that you admire? Greg?
I think Larry Hoff certainly is one. I share I think the same outlook as Larry, which is my door is always open to anyone. I try to be honest, forthright, decent, and that means welcoming anyone who wants to come to my office as a legislature. I'll listen to everyone. It doesn't matter your credo, how you view politically. I'm going to be a problem solver. That's why what I do for clients, particularly my business clients, I don't worry about what a business client's or a client's particular political perspective is. I just try to help them. And so that's my attitude. My attitude also, I've said this before publicly, and I think it bears saying again, but part of what we have to get away from in this very toxic political environment is just throwing out these kind of easy shots at the other side. What that means is trying to be thoughtful, conscientious, tone down the rhetoric, be respectful, decent, and figure out where we have things. That's not to say I won't disagree with folks if I don't disagree with them, but I think we have to be able to disagree without being disagreeable. And so that's the attitude that I'm going to bring to the office. And I think Larry does that.
Okay, thank you. Duncan, who's a local legislator that you admire?
Well, obviously, I'm going to say them both because they were both really helpful with me in this endeavor, is Monica Stonier and Sharon Wiley from the 49th. Obviously, I talk to a lot of business people here in Vancouver who have a great working relationship with both Monica and Sharon, and I tell them I don't expect much different. It is, these are, I have 2 young daughters, and took them to listen to Monica talk, and even my 8-year-old can see that women empower, women in leadership, and be able to explain that back to me, that it's important, that she was happy to see that. And that's beyond words what that means to me as a father of 2 young girls. And so I'll just leave it at that. I was going to reply back, but there's I can say that I can pull it up if you really want me to, but it's obviously there's endorsements that people do, and so whether or not he was a part of it, that's fine. But that's not meant to be attacking. But I think that's where people, where I think I clear the line between what people will say and what people do in group and in their for private endorsements.
Well, and thank you, but we're going to move on from that. Give us your final pitch for why voters should support you, and feel free to mention any endorsements. And you've both already mentioned some, but we'll start with Greg.
Well, thank you. So again, I grew up here in the Mount Vista, Salmon Creek area. I've lived in Battleground for the last 10 years. I've been proud to be a NAMI Southwest Washington board member to talk about these policy and structural challenges that we have in the mental health, and bringing additional resources and policy changes to making sure that we have the resources and tools that we need to deal with this population. And of course, that runs over into drug addiction and homelessness as well. I think we've got to fix the overreach in our criminal justice system. Some of these real problem issues, that legalization of drugs, the inability to pursue suspects. There's a bill out there right now to try to decriminalize or depunish drive-by shootings right now too. We've got to stop bills like that. It's just a bad idea. I'm honored to have the support of the entire Southwest Washington delegation. So that's Senator Ann Rivers, Representative Larry Hoff, Representative Brandon Vick, State Senator Linda Wilson, Representative Paul Harris, and of course our counterparts up in the 20th, which is now Ridgefield. So they're going to be a part of this conversation, Senator Braun and Representative Ed Orcutt and Representative Peter Abarno. So what I hope people take away from this interview is that I try to teach my own sons and act in a way that I want everybody to know that they will always have an open door, and I will always listen to anyone's perspective or thought who comes into the legislature, and do so with a high degree of respect and civility, because I think that's what's most lacking in our politics right now. Is we need to get back to a place where we can have civil discourse about some of these big issues and challenges that we're facing.
Great, thank you. And Duncan? Yeah,
so I mean, as a candidate, I always get the question about, what makes you a good candidate. And the thing about the qualities an elected official should have, and your ability to understand complex information in terms of policy, the expectation to perform under pressure. We have short sessions. You have a lot to do in a short amount of time. You're definitely working under pressure. Understanding that you are dealing with people's lives when it comes to policy. And I feel that those qualifications match what I do as an ICU nurse exactly. I mean, critical care is very complex with having to manage and navigate multi-system injuries and illnesses. I definitely have to perform well under pressure, and I'm very aware that my decisions can affect people's lives. I'm also passionate about keeping the 18th legislative district in Clark County not only a great place to work, but also raise a family. It's the reason why I moved here. I moved here with I had no family, no friends here. But I found this was a great place to live, and that's why I'm here, and I'm setting up roots, and I'm here for a long time. And so a good representative is one who listens to the community, makes decisions based on their needs. I have fought and advocated not only for my patients at the bedside, I've advocated for workers' rights in the workplace. I will continue to do so in the legislature. I want to be a representative for working class families in Olympia. We have enough business elite, and I I apologize to say, but we have enough lawyers in Olympia. We those with financial means in Olympia. We need more working class people in the legislature. And when I say I want to do my part to help people, it's not a pandering talking point. It's what I've done my entire life for my adult career, and my career can back that up. And finally, I'll say that, for 20 straight years, nurses have been voted as the most trusted profession in this country. And I really want to earn the trust of the voters. I want to earn the trust to be a good representative. And yeah, Washington has a great and unique tradition of promoting citizen involvement in its political system. And I truly believe that public service is a privilege and should not be taken lightly. And I feel like just what better way to help serve my community. And I really just hope to earn the vote. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks to both of you and good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.